Greetings, creeps, and welcome to Convo Fango. Today, we are joined by the director of the Unheard, Jeffrey A. Brown. Yay!
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 Hello.
Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you for having me.
So, I was thinking about this. You also directed The Beach House, and I'm watching The Unheard, and I'm thinking, you really have a thing for these like off-season, small town, strange goings-on horror stories. Are you drawn to that? It is just happening by chance? Like,
I'm definitely drawn to it. I think through personal experience a little bit. Both films were shot in Cape Cod off season, and I think I had been to Cape Cod during the off season years ago, and it kind of just stuck in the back of my head. I'm going to let you in on a trade secret. Economics dictates a lot of things, and both of these films are low budget horror films, and you really want the location to do a lot of the work for you. And Cape Cod is a beautiful, just so varied environment, and the houses are old, and there's just so much that you can draw from it without having to bring it with you. And so for the Beach House, that was the initial, not the impetus for the script, but an idea about the filming there. And then with the Unheard, it had been written, the Rasmussen brothers had been at a house in Wellfleet, which is where we wound up shooting. And I knew the environment before I was, brought on the project. So it was something I could visualize quickly. And after filming one movie in the Cape, it wasn't too difficult to do another one there. And
yeah, right.
I love Cape Cod, and I'm a big oyster fan. I don't know if you've seen The Beach House. That's kind of my fear of oysters, like writ large. But yeah, it's a spooky place in the off season. It's real quiet, and weird things happen out there.
That's always such a foreign concept to me because where I grew up, like there is no off season. So I would like ravenously read these books that took place like on the East Coast and talking about like townies and off season. And there was something so unsettling about it. The closest I've ever experienced is like I went to like the Telluride Horror Film Festival, and it's like bustling, and then like the last night of the festival, like all like the service industry people were out and partying because it was like the last day of the season. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? The next morning I woke up and that shit was like a completely different vibe. And I'm like, that could be very creepy if you're not used to it.
Yeah, I'm a location scout, so I've scouted for like 20 years, and that's something. As a scout, you look for seasonal places because if you can shoot them in the off season, and they take on a different, it's like seeing behind the curtain at
Right.
Disney World or something like that. And I grew up in Northwest Indiana, which isn't seasonal in the same way, but we have cottages around Lake Michigan, which is kind of a similar vibe. And but yeah, Cape Cod is a very limited kind of season. It's Labor Day to Memorial Day, or Memorial Day to Labor Day. But once that's done, things shut down. And it's also kind of an apocalyptic feeling. Not Cape Cod is not apocalyptic, but like closed.
No, hold on, let
Closed.
me back that up.
Hold on. Edit. No,
Cape Codder's just sending all the hate mail right now.
yeah, they're like, what is he talking about? It's a lovely place. But a closed hotel, it's like all these vacant rooms, and it's like, well, what is still there? What are the memories or things that are there? And that's very much plays much more into the Unheard, I think, than even the Beach House, where Chloe is remembering things of another of her past that's almost like another life. And so I think coming to terms with the memories of how memory makes you who you are, that's something else that I was very interested in with the script and with the making of the movie.
There's something about vacancy or absence that just it's unsettling. So even not having occupied that space, we know that there was once an energy in that space and it's no longer there. And that already comes across, like you said, the location is already doing so much of the work because something about that is coming across. And then we're living through like these memories, and just all of this is like echoes of what was there, but it's not there now. And it's something about that is just unsettling, I think, like deeply primordial inside of us.
And I think you brought up some echoes. It's like hearing echoes of the past.
Right.
That was very much something in the film. I think there's a book called The Weird and the Eerie, and it's like the definition of the weird, I think, is presence where there should be absence, and the eerie is absence where there should be presence. And so off season, I think, is very much absence where there should be presence, because it's what's left.
Right.
So that was something I think that the beach house is weird and this one is eerie. So if you're going to go like into those definitions, we wanted to do something
That's your
different this time.
off-season double feature.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, you got weird and eerie. The
And, and
Rasmussens. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no. Go, I was going to say that'd be a good double feature on Shudder coming this weekend if you want on
There you
March 31st.
go.
There you go.
Woo! Get
Sorry.
it? That's your
Woo!
we got your double feature this sorted for this weekend. You're welcome.
Oof. Whew. You're welcome.
The Rasmussens wrote this. They also did Crawl. How did you guys like come together to create this?
It all really comes through our producer Andrew Corkin, who produced The Beach House and he produced The Unheard, and he had read the script of The Unheard, which had been around I think for a little bit before I got involved, and he saw a lot in it, and he just sent it to me. It's like, well, read this and let me know what you think. And I've read a lot of scripts as a location manager, but I haven't read that many as a director. But a lot of them, they're just like, oh, it's like there's big elements that aren't for you or something. It just doesn't quite click. And this one clicked from the first read. There was always something to it and something that I could bring to it. That's another thing that I was like, oh, I'd like to explore this. I really also appreciated what it did in terms of the lead. I thought that it was a real showcase for an actor, and that was something that I was very interested in, because Beach House also, as we kind of went along, it became more and more Liana kind of takes over the movie, and that was something that you don't really think about until you're like in the thick of it, how how much of the movie is on the shoulders of that lead. And that was something else of just that person alone kind of walking through spaces, which was something that I was also very interested in exploring and seeing. And so and then we zoomed with the Rasmussens because this is all like in the thick of COVID, and we got along. They're lovely dudes, so they were just totally game for making this movie. And then after a couple of months when the stars lined up, we were kind of off and running, and so it was a great experience working with them.
Nice. It is very contained, like The Beach House, which means there's a lot resting on your lead actor. How did you come to find Lachlan for this?
So I watched the first season of Sabrina, and I liked it. It's not typically to my taste, but I was really surprised by it. And I liked all the actors, and I it's very subversive and weird, and there's a lot of Lovecraft stuff in it too. There's a lot of horror in general. It's like they like kind of go through the history of horror in like in the show. But Lachlan was an actor that in that show I'd always kind of, I think they're very striking, and it was like, when is Theo, that's Lachlan's character, is like, when that character coming back on? Like, I'd like them to do more. And I think Lachlan was very young. I don't know how old they were when they did it, but they were a teenager. And so, they were the age was, they had the right age for Chloe. Like, Chloe is not an adult, but not a teenager anymore. So it was like, I think they were 20 when we shot, which is like perfect. Cause I said, when you're 22, 23, when it's like you can go away to college and drink, like that, it makes you a different person than that, like kind of still in between. And the movie is very much in between kind of realities, in between the past and the present, and in between all this stuff. And it just, Lachlan kind of embodied that, I felt. And we met, and we clicked immediately. I just knew that this was somebody that I could work with easily, and they were going to bring a lot to the role, like more than I think was ever on the page. And that's like something that you kind of really look for in a lead actor. And they're completely unconventional, which is something else that I wanted an unconventional lead. And there is not a conventional bone in Lachlan's body. So it was, and I'm so glad that it worked out. And they're fascinating to watch. And I think they're great to watch for 2 hours in this film.
I love that. I also love that in between, because like 20 is a weird age, right? Like, you're not a kid, but you're not quite an adult, but it's like, oh, what? Just let me in the bar. Like, I'm right there. Like, I'm so close to it, but you can't. So you're like, where do I hang out? I can't hang out with the teenagers. I can't go to a bar. So it's the weirdest in between that there is, I think.
Yeah. I think I went away to college I went to school in New York City, and I'm from the Midwest. And I remember that summer that I came home, where I was like 19 or 20. And that like sums it up perfectly. It was like, I didn't fit in my home anymore. And I wasn't quite in my college, it's like I was and that summer was very strange, where people kind of go off in different directions and stuff. But I think it's those experiences are awkward, but I think they're necessary. And I think that parlays back into, or goes back into the Unheard, where that's what Chloe is having, that experience of confronting her past. And that was something else that, you know, these weird kind of occurrences that make you who you are, you know, that's very interesting.
I love it. Yeah, everything about it, I won't get into spoilers, but kind of everything about it lives in this sort of in between. Like that's what the core of it is, I think.
Yeah, it's, and it, you know, there's like, what's the opposite of silence is deafening noise, you know, or like, you know, that's kind of, we exist between, you know, life is between. And I think that there's a transitional element to the movie of the spirit realm and the physical realm, and, you know, hearing and sign, you know, it's like all these kind of things that we're kind of just going through. And you know, it kind of the themes of the film kind of writ large on the face of Lachlan Watson, which is like, that was the movie, you know, it's like, it's them alone, you know, they're everywhere. So it's a really, it was a powerful kind of combination of elements that really played into themes that might have been in, you know, that's something else when you're interpreting somebody else's story, you know, you start picking up on things that maybe they had put in there on purpose, or things that I'm bringing to, you know, I'm channeling their ideas, and, you know, and then Lachlan is channeling that as well. It's like, so we're kind of mimicking the process of the movie where these things are moving through you, and and kind of what filters you're catching. If you want to get meta.
I know, I'm always forgetting meta. I love it. People get very passionate about categorizing things. So I'm very curious to see what the conversation around this is going to be, because what subgenre would you put this in, or would you just not categorize it?
Oh, I love genre, but I also think genre is tricky. I see it as a supernatural thriller with horrific elements of it. And, you know, I think that there's, you know, I'm a big fan of Stephen King, and, you know, he talks about the difference between terror and horror and the grotesque. We're definitely in the terror horror realm of things. And, you know, a movie like, off the top of my head, it's like Smile to me is a horror film. We are not, we're like, I think much more of like a thriller, but there are some horrific elements. And, you know, you want people to come away being satisfied with what you give them, but sometimes if their expectations as to what it is, you're not meeting their expectations. And horror fans are the most passionate film fans on the planet. You know, it's like there's a correlation between horror and heavy metal, because they're both like, that is it, you know, they're in.
This is life. Yeah,
it is. And I know I'm a big horror fan too, of course. So you know, but you know, I didn't think about genre while we were making it, and then when we're done, we're like, well, it's, you know, it's not really a horror film, but it is kind of a horror film. So we're between things. We're not defined. You know, it's shades of gray.
I would say bringing it back around, it's living in the in-between. It is a horror film. I will say it's a horror film. People get very adamant about their definitions. I would define this as a horror film, but there are subgenres.
You're Fangoria, so you know better than I do.
I think another argument that's going to come up is, this a giallo film?
I mean, we tried.
Yeah. Did you have that kind of anywhere in like the back of your minds as far as like what you're
I would say in the forefront of
forefront. Okay.
I watched every Argento film in preparation for this. I watched a ton of giallo. I had been interested in giallo, but I hadn't quite watched too many of them. And then you know, they are style over substance. You know, it's like, you have, you know, in the best one, you have Morricone does the music. So like that elevates a bunch of them. Like there's and Shudder. I think a lot of the giallos were kind of hard to find. I think I felt like they came out in the VHS era, kind of disappeared for DVDs. And then, you know, Shudder, and recently a lot of them have become available. And so there's like something like Black Belly the Tarantula, which is on Shudder, you know, has a score by Morricone. And so that kind of elevates it. And like, yeah, it was like the start of the pandemic, so I watched like 50 giallo films.
Oh, nice.
And I like, there's one on there right now called Footprints on the Moon, or Footsteps. I think it has a bunch of different titles. I've seen that movie like 4 or 5 times, and it's not that I love it, but it's like there's something to it. It's so bizarre, and Vittorio Storaro shot it, so it's just a gorgeous movie, and it doesn't quite add up. And I don't even know if it's a giallo, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
but then like everyone's like, oh, Argento Suspiria, also kind of not really a giallo. It's like it's a supernatural horror film with giallo elements because, you know,
Right.
Argento kind of, I don't know if he created the giallo, you know, you could say Mario Bava did, but like he made it, he figured out a combination to have it make money. So then he's
Right.
like, he's kind of the big guy. I mean, my equation for Argento's approach is like Sergio Leone directing Vertigo with like dashes of Mario Bava, and that's
Mhm.
like that's like Bird of the Crystal Plumage is like kind of that movie, which has, you know, Storaro shot it and Morricone did the music. So you've got these geniuses, and Argento's kind of just like, you know, blending these together.
Right. He's in the
Yeah.
in between.
So he's in between. So yeah, we tried to do like an element of giallo to it, but that was something else. Our DP early on was like, well, Suspiria was shot on 35 with a processing method that they used for Bambi, which doesn't exist anymore. So we're not gonna do that. And so we wanted to kind of take the element of giallo and kind of do something different. Also, I think a lot of the I can digress for a lot, so I'll be quick. But I think a lot of the giallo films are pretty misogynistic. You know, they're pretty rough when you watch them, and that was something else where I kind of wanted to address that in a way without it, you know, and not being that, because they're pretty. Some of them are pretty nasty, and
Right.
so it's like our sensibility is much different than the Italians in the early 70s, and so I wanted to kind of take a contemporary approach to what the elements of giallo could be, which is, you know, they're not overtly supernatural, but you can have dashes of supernatural here and there. I love the giallo actresses as well. I'm really into Mimsy Farmer. She's great in a bunch of them, and you know, so but it's a great. During the pandemic, I watched a lot of movies, so that was something to really go on a deep dive. It was you know, and I love researching, you know, these projects. So like having this whole treasure trove of movies that I maybe haven't delved too into, just as preparation for this. And I kind of did the same thing with 50s horror films for the Beach House, for the atomic sci-fi films, where now I could see a bunch of them, whereas like I'd read about them or something like that. And same with the giallo, where these things that weren't available, now they are, and I can watch them and kind of just go deep into it.
I love that because I can see both of those references in both of those films. Like those tones come through. It's not overtly like I was trying to make a 50 sci-fi or I was trying to make a giallo, but the elements and the tones are very much there and you very much feel it.
Thank you.
I could talk with you about this for like another hour and I know we're out of time. So I'm bummed because
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh yeah, I love this.
No, but you know, there are movies that do the homages very well. It's like, was it A Mare? I think is like as good as any giallo film. Like it's just like it's that, and it's like kind of pushes it, but it feels like it. And you know, not The Love Witch is one of my favorite films, and that's very much, you know, an homage and but aesthetically, you know, they're kind of doing something. She's doing something so specific with that. But it's also twisting. It's very subversive,
Right.
as opposed to kind of the movies that it's emulating. But you know, we're not quite. I don't see The Unheard as quite as like meta, or you know, it's not quite as like whatever that is. You know, we're not doing that. It's much more of an immersive film. But you know, every film is different, and those are these threads that we tried to just kind of, you know, hit on while we were making the film.
That's a perfect way to describe it, as threads, because you're not watching it thinking like, oh, you tried to replicate exactly like a giallo, and you took elements of it, it's threaded throughout, and if you're familiar with the genre, then you will like feel it in there and it's prevalent.
We hope so.
Yeah. And I'm gonna say for me, I do count Suspiria, and people will fight me about it till the day I die, and that's fine.
Count Suspiria as a giallo. Hey, you know, that's the beauty of it, is like, you know, there is no right answer, you know, but
Right.
I mean,
If you say no, it's not, I understand why you say that, but also it brings so many people to the genre. It's like this like weird gateway in between, and it serves as a gateway to the more pure kind of stuff. So I'm like,
and,
I'm gonna count that.
yeah, and I mean, I think it's his masterpiece. For this one, I really got into like Phenomena and
Phenomena, yeah.
Tenebrae. The two, and Tenebrae is much different, and it's pretty much a straight, his like returning to giallo, but it's like a very clean, like almost a cold like style to the film, as opposed to the very lush, like the Animal trilogy is very, very lush films. And that's like, you know, there's synth and stuff, and Phenomena at the end of that movie is just, that was kind of our model, you know, not to give our ending away, but it's like you have this extended thing that's just like what, those are two other ones that I really like. And I also like The Dead Zone, I think was another one, like Jennifer Connelly's character being this kind of their abilities, making them isolated, and Christopher Walken in The Dead Zone. Those were like two characters that I really looked at for Chloe, and kind of, because I think Chloe becomes more her hearing is supposed to kind of bring her some peace or closure, and really just isolates her. It isolates her even more, which is, tragic and scary. But I think that that's also, when your world changes, you're adjusting to the new world, and unfortunately there's forces against her adjustment. So
there are some forces at play there against the adjustment. All right, Jeffrey, thank you so much. You guys can check out The Unheard on Shudder. Makes a beautiful double feature with The Beach House, just saying.